I've gone frame by frame through the Armored Core 6 gameplay trailer and found 5 things you might have missed that could impact the gameplay and story in Fires of Rubicon. Stay tuned for some big speculation later in the video. What's up gamers, it's Absurd here. Today we are going to speculate further about Armored Core 6 based on my frame by frame viewing of the initial gameplay trailer. So let's get started. Boss phases with a change in enemy abilities, behavior, or even additional enemies aren't new to the Armored Core games, but I also wouldn't say they've ever been a part of the game's core design. Based on the success of the Souls games and Elden Ring, many fans now expect boss phases as part of the core FromSoft formula. Without viewing the Fires of Rubicon trailer frame by frame, the boss phases that we can expect are easy to miss. However, these clips do confirm that boss phases will occur in Armored Core 6, and they seem to play a much bigger role than in previous AC titles. Most of the historically available leg types in the Armored Core franchise were made obvious in this gameplay trailer: biped, reverse joint, quad legs, and tank treads. But it's only in this scene, if we zoom and slow down the footage, that we notice an AC with hover legs. Hover legs were available in most of the early gen games and made unavailable from Armored Core 4 onward. This clip suggests that the hover leg type could return for use in Armored Core 6. This logo is not exactly hidden in the trailer as it shows up several times. However, what is more difficult to notice without careful viewing is that the logo appears in one of the boss fights. I use the term logo rather than emblem for a reason. Emblems are calling cards for AC pilots, but this boss is not an AC. It appears to be a large labor machine likely designed for harvesting or processing coral. I first suspected RAD to be one of the major corporations in the story. However, after further research, I found this post on the Armored Core subreddit that contained pictures of the stickers from the Collector's Edition pre-order package and speculated that these 4 logos will represent the human corporations in the story. Notice how RAD is not one of them. This leads me to believe that RAD is an organization native to Rubicon that was a powerful player in the coral industry before the Fires of Ibis, and that much of their infrastructure survived the calamity. I expect that bosses like these are haywire industrial equipment driven to dysfunction by the intense coral radiation of the calamity, and are the primary obstacle between the corporations and coral extraction, necessitating the need for armored cores to combat the haywire tech. Before we get to the last 2 things you might have missed, I want to thank Eric Gonzalez for supporting me on Patreon. If you want to show your support for my content, visit the link in the description. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on more Armored Core content in the future. There is a lot going on in this opening shot of the trailer. We see that orbit is incredibly populated. We also see cables, some with panels, some bare, and another with a device attached to it. These cables immediately made me wonder as to their function and whether they all shared similar functions, as they do appear to be different. Thinking in terms of Armored Core, I was reminded of the Rapture orbit elevator in Armored Core 2 Another Age, and now I think some of these cables could function as space elevators for extracting coral, equipment, and possibly armored cores from the surface of Rubicon. Space elevators are a hypothetical technology in which a cable is anchored to a planetary body and extended into space where it is held there by a counterweight. The rotation of the planet creates a centrifugal force that can move a load called a climber up the ladder and into orbit, bypassing the necessity for rocket propulsion to escape gravity. In Another Age, the final mission sequence is to defeat ACs who were abandoned on Mars. These ACs then hijacked the Rapture orbit elevator to return to Earth in a disgruntled act of revenge against the Earth government that abandoned them. This implementation of space elevators differs from the above theory in that it seems the rogue ACs used the elevator to descend from orbit to the surface, but it's a sci-fi theory in a video game, so it doesn't really have to make sense. Regardless, there is precedence for space elevators in Armored Core, and this specific event ties in with my next observation and theory. The last thing you might have missed in the trailer is something you certainly saw, but perhaps without considering the implications. With casual viewing of this clip, you might not have noticed that this prominent structure appears to be a space shuttle. That may not seem strange or important, but it could carry some serious implications for the plot. In my last video, I linked this clip to an old leak from 2022. The fact that this shuttle showed up as part of the consumer survey over 18 months ago could suggest its relative importance, being an earlier asset and worth getting feedback on. We can also look at this clip from the trailer and zoom into the background to see what appears to be a silhouette of the same shuttle. The recurring appearance of this shuttle could be coincidental, but it's more fun to speculate as to why it keeps showing up. Someone is trying to leave Rubicon. I have a theory about how this furthers the speculation in my previous video, so if you didn't buy into that one, you probably won't buy into this one. This theory also has less evidence to support it than my last one, but if you're here for wild speculation, stick around and hear me out. I'd love to hear your take in the comments, even if it's just to call me a nut job. My last video discussed the potential for a plot involving native freedom fighters and insurgents on Rubicon. I won't go too deep into that theory here, but I encourage you to check out the video if you haven't. Before getting too far ahead of myself, let's trace this thread back to my previous point regarding the final missions in Another Age. At the end of the war on Mars in Armored Core 2, the corporations returned to Earth, but some were left behind, notably Ravens, but likely infrastructure and workers to support that infrastructure were left behind as well. What if, like the abandoned Ravens in Another Age, AC pilots were left behind to endure the fallout of the fires of Ibis, while RAD and other organizations fled the impending calamity? Much like how the Ravens in Another Age were radicalized by this abandonment, I expect the remaining natives of Rubicon 3 to be similarly radicalized. Radicalized enough to combat these new and foreign institutions of greed. Radicalized enough to punish that greed by feeding the fires of Ibis until the last cinders of coral in the system burn out of existence. This is a trope in fiction known either as "we win because you didn't" or "no MacGuffin, no winner," in which the victory condition for one side is denying the other side their prize, their MacGuffin. We see this in Treasure Planet when Captain Flint had the entire planet rigged to explode if anyone was to find his treasure. In Raiders of the Lost Ark, when Indiana Jones threatens to blow up the Ark of the Covenant in a power play versus the Nazis, and in Dune, when Paul Atreides threatens to destroy all spice on Arrakis to manipulate the Emperor and his navigators, who rely on the spice for travel, into surrendering the planet. The setting of Rubicon 3 as we know it is ripe for this trope, but how does it relate to the shuttle? If we assume that the natives of Rubicon are spiteful, like the rogue ACs at the end of Another Age, it's not unlikely that they would use a plan to destroy the coral, and likely the system due to the coral's volatility, as a power play against the corporations. If this plan was to follow through, the shuttle could be the sole means of escaping the system alive for these natives, or for our character. While I don't find it unrealistic for spiteful radicals to go down in flames with their glorious plan, I do expect that FromSoft would offer the player a way out of certain death in following this path to its end. If point 4 in this video regarding space elevators is true, it might seem to contradict this theory with the shuttle, but it is possible that the elevators only work in one direction, as per the actual science of the theory, opposed to how they function in Another Age, especially since we are seen dropping into the system from orbit. Additionally, the elevators would be controlled by the corporation, and while I'm sure they could be hijacked by the natives as in Another Age, destruction of the elevators could be the primary means of halting coral extraction from the surface of Rubicon until the full plan can be realized. This potential storyline would involve severing the corporation's connection to the coral supply via the elevators, initiating a new apocalyptic coral event to destroy the coral industry for good, and fleeing the system on this shuttle to fly free of corporate control, of coral control, and of the cage that Rubicon 3 has become for its native population. This plot is powerful in that it would mean the corporations become the dogs, greed being their coral control device, a greed even luring them to their own doom, while the raven flies free to roost among the stars.